Welcome back to another episode of Two Florida Fans back in the rural central basements, talking about the Florida Gators football team and the misery they bring us. Um, the Florida Gators lost 33 to 20 to the Texas A&M Aggies, and I know that score's only 13 points, but that's honestly pretty deceptive. It was 27 to 7 or 26 to 7 at one point, maybe 33 to 7.
20
Um,
nothing at halftime.
yeah, the Aggies dominated the whole game, led the whole game. It was never really a contest. Jameer DK looked pretty good. I liked his performance. That was about it. And we're not going to dwell on this game too much. There were some reports that boosters had gathered the money to pay for Billy Napier's buyout, and there was a meeting supposedly with the board of trustees Sunday morning, but to our knowledge, nothing came from it. It's 10:37 right now, Central Time, my time, and Billy Napier's probably giving a press conference right now. So it's not looking good for him though. They'll play what is probably the worst team in the SEC next week on the road, Mississippi State. And then they'll get UCF the week after that, who just had a crazy comeback win against who was it, TCU, I believe. So we'll see. These are quote unquote winnable games, but I don't know what to think of this Florida team anymore under Billy Napier. So we are basically going to go a deep dive into Topher's hot board. We have got 25 guys. We're not going to go in depth on every single one of them, mostly because we talked about some of these guys a couple weeks ago. You can go listen to our first episode, and B, some of these guys are, it's broken up into tiers, and once you get into that tier three, it's if literally the first 20 or so guys say no to you, get one of these guys. So just quickly touching on the A&M game, um, did not look good. And my one takeaway from it, because I did not watch the whole game, is what is Billy Napier doing with the quarterbacks? Uh, it does not make sense to me. I mean, Topher, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, so there's a quote post game. Let me pull it up because I quote tweeted it. I quote tweeted Graham Hall, Florida reporter. He tweeted the quote from Billy Napier. Let me just find it. So he was asked about sticking with Graham Mertz in the third quarter after Florida's good touchdown drive. And he said, quote, "We ultimately made a commitment to rotate the players, a certain progression, a certain way, regardless of the outcome." Um, And I think that kind of just puts a bow on the entire Billy Napier experiment. Is that he thinks that his plan is smarter than the way football works. He just has these plans and he sticks to them no matter what. He does not adjust in game. He does not really adjust to opponent. He doesn't adjust to what's working for him. It's kind of baffling. Obviously, this didn't work at all. Graham Mertz never got comfortable. DJ never got comfortable. They're both looking over their shoulder, trying not to make a mistake instead of playing loose. Someone made a really good point about DJ, especially about how he looked a lot tenser, a lot more uncomfortable this week. And a part of that's playing Texas A&M instead of Samford. But you can tell when it's last week and it's like, hey kid, just go out, do your thing. You're our guy versus we're gonna switch you and you don't know when, or we're gonna switch you every other drive. There's nothing you can do. It's kind of hard to play fast and free. It doesn't make sense. This isn't how football works. And honestly, it puts a bow on the Napier experiment of a guy who has ideas that he believes in so dogmatically that he refuses to adjust. He refuses to make the smart, sensible play because he thinks he's smarter than it. And it was a huge reason why they sucked, but also the offensive line is so bad that it doesn't even matter.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. I feel like if you're gonna do it, if you're going to have this kind of quarterback rotation, you have to just ride the hot hand. And Graham Mertz actually had a pretty good touchdown drive. Like I liked the touchdown pass he threw. I liked how they ran that drive. The game was pretty much over by then and made it 33 to 20, but like you have a chance. You have an inkling of a chance. And then he switches him out for DJ. And this is not to be sound hypocritical of like, oh, well, now I want Mertz, even though we've been clamoring for DJ. But like, if you're gonna play both guys, ride the hot hand. Graham Mertz is starting to heat up, look good, look consistent, and then now you switch him back out for DJ. And then when you put in DJ, what? That second pick, the first pick he throws is on a Hail Mary as it goes to halftime. So I don't blame him for that. That's a play where you just chuck it up in the end zone. If your guy catches it, he catches it. If the other team catches it, just tackle him. Those picks or whatever. Second pick, it's a little on him, it's a little on the receiver, but the fact of the matter is, why is Taylor Spirito on the field? Why is Taylor? This is no disrespect to Taylor Spirito. Again, great guy. I bet. I'm sure. I've never met him, but like we literally talked last week about how they have all this speed, and even when they don't have all this speed, they have like physical big dudes who are like four-star recruits. They have so many guys who are blue chip prospects. Where is Andy Jean? Free my guy Andy Jean. And of course, when he's throwing to like the six string wide receiver, he's not going to make a play and then the ball gets picked off. I mean, shout out to my guy Arliss Boardingham tackling the defensive back simply with his aura. He just like that was so great. The defender just like slides down as Arliss is just like staring him down. I really enjoyed that was pretty much the only thing I enjoyed from that game. But it's puzzling. So it all feels like this is the end of the road for Billy. He has not been fired yet, so he will likely be coaching the Mississippi State game. So we have a guy pre-fired, but all the reports seem to show that
Yeah,
that
it's
is going
done.
to be the case.
It's
We
done. There's
don't, we
nothing he
don't.
can do. It's just when they make it happen. Might be a bye week just for logistics. I think they have a bye after Mississippi State. It'll probably be then, just logistics. It's over.
Yeah. So let's just get right into the hot board. Your top guy. Do you want to talk about it actually real quick? Just break down what the hot board is and how
Yeah,
it looks
so
right
we're,
now.
we're gonna be here a while because again, it's a full top 25. So we're just gonna summarize it. There's tiers here. So I broke it up into three tiers. It's basically the top tier is the 1A slam dunk candidates. It would get everybody excited. Program would look like it's on top, like the no-brainer candidates. Tier two is just a list of sitting head coaches that I think are really good. Some are more exciting than others. Some are more realistic than others, but they're all sitting head coaches that are doing a pretty good job somewhere in the country. And then tier three is just some assistant coaches that I think will be SEC head coaches at some point. Maybe it's a little too early for the Florida job, but full list 25 guys. One of these people will be the head coach at Florida. I can guarantee it.
There we go. So just getting straight into tier one. Obviously tier one is like who we would want the most, who would probably be the most best possible scenarios. But we're not really going to touch on tier one too much because the top guy is Lane Kiffin. He is the guy who's getting the most buzz to be Florida's next coach, just from the fan base. I don't know how realistic it would be in terms of how much Lane wants it, but to the fan base wants the most, it seems. He is a very experienced guy, and especially in the SEC. He's Ole Miss head coach, Alabama OC, was a short stint in Tennessee. So he knows this region. He knows SEC football. He's won at this level. Um, I think it's pretty explanatory. And again, we already talked about him a lot in the first time we talked about it. And then the second guy in tier one is Dan Lanning, who is probably the dream candidate, would you say, Topher? If you could just pick anybody without having to deal with any of the other, anything else in context of where he's at or his contract, I mean, that's who you want.
Yeah, pretty much. Because he's basically just Kirby too, but more likable. Um,
Exactly.
he's
They
proven
don't
he
they don't
knows how
do
to
up
build
as
a
many
staff.
reckless driving
Ex-
charges.
exactly. He's
Yep.
like the good version of Kirby in terms of like as a person. Builds a staff, great recruiter, winning a lot at Oregon. Would be a slam dunk. Probably won't leave. He's getting paid a ton of money. They have a huge NIL fund. They're very well run as an organization. But him and Lane are the two guys you dream about. They're the two guys you want. That's where this list has to start. Lane, if he wants the smoke, will come. I think he has that kind of competitive edge to him where he wants to be on the biggest stage. He wants to play in front of 90,000. He wants to play for conference titles and championships more regularly. And Florida can do that if they fix some of their off the field stuff, which is kind of important context to this job as well. Yeah, that's where it starts, but we'll see if either of those guys are interested. If not, there's a whole lot of other guys that I think could do a job here.
Yeah, I could definitely see Lane. It's just it's unless Dan Lanning is like, with Southern ties, you just get so homesick to that he wants to leave. But when you have Phil Knight saying he'll empty the entire Nike bag to win a championship, I mean, it's hard to compete with that NIL wise. and they're kind of dunking on USC for California recruits right now. So he's got a very, resource driven region. So yeah, so that kind of gets us into tier two. There's some guys here who I have on my list as well. So I kind of want to start there. A guy who I'm very intrigued by, who probably wouldn't excite the fan base too much because it would maybe feel a little bit like Billy Napier 2.0, just in the sense of where he's coming from. But I really like is John or not John Summerall. Sorry, he is on the list, but I wanted to start with Alex Golish, head coach at USF. So Topher, you just talk about him and why he's in tier two.
Yeah, so he's definitely one of the most exciting young coaches in the country. He's in his second year at South Florida. He took over a program that had completely bottomed out. They had 10 or more losses, like 3 straight years under Jeff Scott. It got bad, bad. He goes 6-7 last year. They already look good. This year, they have an exciting offense. Comes from the Josh Heupel tree, so it's that kind of Baylor-ish veer and shoot stuff. Recruiting at a high clip for the G5 level. Um, he seems like a natural fit to come to the SEC at some point. Obviously, with that Tennessee experience, recruiting chops, all that. He's in tier two because of that. Has head coach experience. I'm not super high on him. I think he is actually number 22 on my list just because of how unproven he is. He's 9-7 as a head coach. We'll see obviously how this year ends up, but he's just got a lot to prove, and I think Florida, where it's at, needs a little more security than he has. But it would definitely be an exciting one, and he could be very well a great head coach down the line.
Yeah, I think the case for him is like if Florida wants to go the sort of bridge coach route, um, I think he's a guy who maybe we haven't seen him too much as a head coach just because he hasn't been as a head coach that long. And he is 9-7, but I feel like the record is a little deceptive because of just how bad that USF situation was. I mean the funny parallel is Jeff Scott came from Clemson, so he's kind of under that Billy Napier trajectory where Billy was at the OC at Clemson, he got fired. And then Jeff Scott kind of same thing, and then going to USF and then just completely just not working for him at a Florida school, kind of how it is with Napier. And then maybe Golish is the same way where he comes in, takes over for the former Clemson guy and turns it around. But we will see. The thing that, I'm just most impressed about him, I mean, obviously the way he's turning around that program has been huge, is just the recruiting. As you mentioned, Topher. I mean, class of 24 ranked as the highest G5 school, not just number one in the American, but number one out of all G5 schools. I think they were 54th nationally, which is higher than some P4 schools as well. So, that's definitely nothing to shake your head at. And you could say, "Oh, he's in Florida. Of course, he's going to recruit well. Like, of course, he's in a good region." But like, you're still down the pecking order of the Florida schools. You're below Miami. You're below Florida. You're below UCF. You're below FSU. Um, and FAU has been able to make some waves in the over. I mean, they've struggled this year, but like, they've had guys like Lane and Taggart and Tom Herman, like notable head coaching names who, are going to get some guys just based off of that name brand. Um, so for him to recruit at such a high clip, I'm very impressed by that. And they have the number one class of the G5 schools this year as well so far. I mean, we'll see how it ends because class of 25 is still a long ways to go to sort of finalize those classes, but right now very promising again. So I definitely like what he's done recruiting. I think his offensive scheme maybe is a little dishonorable in the grand scheme of things, just from a watching standpoint. But I mean, the truth is it works and it gets the job done. And it's one of those things where if you bring in a coach and DJ Lagway transfers, which, I don't know how likely that would be, but if it were to happen, maybe Golish brings Byron Brown, who is a very fun quarterback. And, I don't know how good he would be at the SEC level, but he would certainly be fun. He would certainly be a Diego Pavia type where you're like, I don't know how good this guy is, but man, is he a hooper. And man, do I enjoy watching him play the game of football. I definitely get your critique of, experience. He doesn't necessarily have it as a head coach. And that could definitely be an issue. But if Florida's just trying to get a bridge coach who's cheaper, who can return you to that baseline competence of at least, I think he would at least get Florida back to like an 8-4, 9-3. And obviously you want to do better than that. But again, it's like the baseline competence is how you then land that big fish.
Yeah.
If Golish ends up not working out, he has an obvious ceiling, and then you got to go to the next guy. Um,
And
but
kind of to your point of him as a bridge coach, I think the funny parallel is actually with his former boss, Josh Heupel,
yeah,
who was the offensive coordinator at Missouri during the Drew Lock experiment in Columbia. He comes to UCF to replace Scott Frost. He's only there for 2 years, but they go like 25-1 or something crazy. He takes over Tennessee. People kind of that's kind of a bridge coach because Tennessee's AD was UCF's AD that hired Heupel. They kind of missed on some bigger fish, so it's like, all right, Heupel's fine. We know him. We trust him. And now Tennessee is a legitimate national championship contender, even though he was technically a bridge coach. And I don't think Golish has that much juice,
yeah,
but it's possible. He's very competent, and as you said, the veer and shoot that's a well run veer and shoot offense kind of can raise your floor pretty dramatically.
yeah. And I mean, just look at how they played against Alabama. Obviously, they lost this year and last year, and this year's game kind of got away from them at the very end. But I think this was like his test to be like, can you run a scheme offensively and defensively that can compete against, the top of the SEC? And for the most part, I mean, he almost beat Saban in Saban's last year, and they were very competitive and very close with uh Kalen DeBoer and his first year, and that was in Tuscaloosa as well. Um, so I definitely like him a lot as a name. And then Topher, I'll kind of throw to you a guy in your tier two that you want to start out talking about.
Yeah, there's a lot of names I love. I'm gonna start with one that nobody else will. So this is gonna be a short one because again, nobody else likes this hire. I'm an island of one here, but I love Gus Malzahn. Um, he's doing decent work over at UCF. He's been their coach through the Big 12 transition. Obviously, was at Auburn for basically a decade. Was really good there, as you can tell by what Auburn's become the minute he left. He went to a national championship game a decade ago. There are obvious critiques. He's a little older. Um, his scheme can be a little dated. Is he a national championship coach at this time in history? I don't know, but he's a proven recruiter in the Southeastern Conference. Uh, he's a proven winner in the Southeastern Conference. He's the kind of guy for me as a bridge coach option. I love Gus. I think he would make Pro Florida stable and fine. And then in like 5 years, maybe he gets in his mid 60s. He's like, maybe it's time to move on. And then you hire his protege as a guy. I like Gus Malzahn.
Yeah, he's definitely a name who I feel like would definitely not be as popular among the Florida fan base, but I could see him definitely working. I think, funny enough, I think the thing about him that would kind of as a comparison of hiring is like it kind of feels like with Auburn hiring Hugh Freeze, only you don't have any of the baggage that Hugh Freeze has as personality or just as a person. Whereas you hire Hugh Freeze and he's kind of a very controversial figure. Uh, but the thing that you like about Hugh Freeze is he has experience, plenty of SEC experience, and he recruits very well. I mean, we're seeing that with Auburn. Obviously, they're not winning on the field right now, but Auburn's recruiting is kind of gone off the rails. And you see that just with the guys that they've managed to flip from Florida to Auburn, who were top level recruits from the class of 24. Um, and no, this is not me saying that they should hire Hugh Freeze. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that there is some similarities there, just in terms of Florida hiring a guy who has experience. Maybe is not going to be there forever just because of his age. But he's definitely someone who I think can turn around the program and work as a bridge coach to get to that baseline competence just because he has so much experience. And I mean, we'll get a preview of that. I mean, if they come in here and they beat Florida, uh, was it 3 weeks from now because Mississippi State at the bye and then UCF, uh, we'll see if he still has the chops for the SEC to go into a tough road environment like the Swamp. Because I mean, they've still been able to pack it, even though they've not looked very good at home. But no, he's definitely a guy who I think, uh, I don't know how high of a ceiling he has, but he definitely has a very high floor, I feel. And
Yeah,
I think that could
that's my
prove,
thought. That's my
yeah,
thought process with him is that he's a very stable guy. He's a guy who knows how to win. He knows how to recruit. Um, I would trust him to be fine.
yeah. And that's the thing I feel like with a lot of these guys on your list and the guys we talked about so far, Lane, Golish, and Gus Malzahn. I feel like a lot of these guys are guys who we kind of either know their ceiling or we feel like we know where their ceiling is. or we haven't seen enough to know exactly where how high it is, but we know they all have a high floor, and I think that's kind of where Florida just needs to go here. They need a high floor guy who knows how to win. Maybe they're going to struggle to get over the hump a few years from now, but that's an issue when we'll get to it. Let's get to the hump first and see how they do before we talk about, oh, is this guy going to be able to get over it?
Yeah.
So another guy on your list, in your tier two that I'm pretty interested in is well, actually, real quick, I'll mention another guy that's on your list is Lance Leipold, who again, a really good coach, has won everywhere. Um, I like him a lot. We talked about him a lot in 2 weeks ago in our first episode, so I don't want to dwell on him too much, just because he is a guy that we did talk about a lot. But another guy I want to go to is a former Florida alum, Jed Fish, who just suffered a pretty, I'll say, an embarrassing loss in the Apple Cup to Washington State. They ran a really weird play, like a speed option to the sideline on a 4th and goal that was very puzzling to me. But he's still a guy. We'll see how if how he does it with Washington this year, and we'll see how it goes. So, Topher, do you want to lead off talking about Jed Fish?
Yeah, so this was a much more exciting name last year, for sure. Coming off, I think they won 9 games at Arizona last year.
I
Obviously,
think that's a
when
10
he
with the
took
bowl
over,
game.
yeah, okay, so great year, obviously, in the
Yeah.
desert. And he took over that program in dire straits. After the Kevin Sumlin era, they were another team in like 10 loss territory. It was bad, bad. And he pretty quickly turned them into a winner. Really good recruiting at the high school level, getting some local Arizona and Southern California guys to stay in Tucson. Um, Great portal recruiting. Obviously, a guy like Jacob Cowing now in the NFL. He got him from the portal. He was a superstar for them. I'm a little less excited by him now. One, I think the decision to go to Washington when he did, I get it, but also it kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth for the kind of guy he is. Um, I know it's a business and all that, but I don't know. Something about it just rubbed me the wrong way. Um, and the other thing is, only been a head coach for 4 years, 19 and 23 record, never coached in the Southeast, just took a new job at Washington less than a year ago. I don't think the timing's right here. And to be honest, as fun as it is, and as cool as it would be to have a guy who went to UF as the head coach, I don't really see it anymore. At least the picture's a lot cloudier than I wanted it to be.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, you know, that loss to Wazoo, I know it's just one loss, and I know that this was always going to be kind of a reloading, rebuilding year with how much they lost after making the national championship. Because you lose your quarterback, you lose basically your entire receiving room, you lose like all of your top defensive guys. So there was a lot to fix about this program, but even then, I mean, the loss to Wazoo, that's just, I mean, great for Wazoo. I'm not saying that I didn't want that for them, but it does kind of leave a bad taste in your mouth. And it also, him leaving Arizona for Washington leaves a bad taste in your mouth because, you know, he looked like he was going to be the guy to sort of lead them into the Big 12 and be an actual contender for the Big 12. I mean, I still like some of the pieces on that team, but I mean, I think they showed Friday night against Kansas State that they have just kind of been gutted in key pieces where they're just not going to be able to contend for that conference. I still think they'll be good. I still think they can go like 7-5, 8-4. Um, but they're clearly a tier below the Kansas States of that conference. And so in one regard, I think that move does kind of rub me the wrong way. In another regard, it does show me that if Florida offered him, he'd probably take it, because he's clearly does not have the sort of that loyalty aspect to him. And in another regard, though, that also shows me if he takes it and he does work and Florida goes like 12-1 or something, whatever, name a really good record by year one or year two, year three. If a school like a tier above Florida starts calling, say Dan Lanning leaves for a different job and Oregon's like, Jed Fish, do you want to be our head coach? He'd probably take it. If Ohio State fires Ryan Day and they're like, hey, Ohio State, for whatever, they're like, hey, Jed Fish, you're doing really well, Florida. You want to come be our head coach? Maybe he'd take it. Whereas some of these other guys, I feel like if they worked at Florida and succeeded, they'd probably be there, more long term. Uh, but we'll see. He is a guy who I kind of want to see how this Washington rebuild goes. and then maybe down the line, like say you get a bridge coach like Alex Golish, and it's like, okay, Florida's going like 8-4, 9-3 every year, but they have an obvious ceiling with a guy like him. Uh, and then you see Jed Fisher's doing really well at Washington. You're like, hey, you want to come back to your alma mater? Then maybe then. But he's definitely an intriguing name regardless. But there it's definitely a much less exciting hire than it was
Yeah.
a while back.
Uh, okay. So I have a grab bag of three Midwestern coaches that have no notable ties to the Southeast or the University of Florida. And I just want your quick thought on all three and which one would excite you the most. So
Okay.
Chris Kleinman at Kansas State, national champion at North Dakota State. Kansas State, consistent 8, 9, 10 win team his entire time he's been there. Matt Campbell at Iowa State has coached in Ohio and Iowa his entire career, but Iowa State is just consistently super solid. They get guys to the NFL, recruited at a pretty decent level for the kind of program they are. And then Jeff Brom at Louisville. Obviously, he's been in Kentucky and Indiana his entire career. One of the smartest and most exciting offensive coaches in the country, in my opinion. Gets skill guys, has learned how to use the NIL game pretty well at Louisville. So, of those three, Jeff Brom, Matt Campbell, Chris Kleiman, what are your thoughts and who would excite you most at UF?
I think starting off the one that excites me of those three names is definitely Chris Kleiman. I think he's just, of the three, I think he's the most FFC, gives off those biggest vibes. I think he's just a winner. I think he's done a great job of, guiding Kansas State past the Bill Snyder era and back into just this extreme relevancy. I think he's got him set up in a position where obviously we'll see how Utah does. And then we'll see how Cam Rising is, if he plays or not, if he comes back for another year next year. But it kind of feels like Kansas State has set themselves up to be in a position where, I'm not saying they're going to be the next Texas or OU, where like, oh, they're going to be a playoff contender, or I guess with the 12 team, I am saying this, where I don't know if they're going to win a national championship in the near future, but I think they're set up where like they can really be the top dog of the Big 12 for, the foreseeable future. I think he's done a great job recruiting. I think his offensive scheme works really well. I just really like him as a head coach, and I think he'd be a great fit at Florida, just in terms of the mentality and the attitude he brings and the sort of culture he's been able to build there and the recruiting he's been able to build there. So he's definitely of those three names you just mentioned, he'd be the top guy for me. Um,
Yeah,
do you
I
want to talk about
mean,
him a little more?
he's a winner, and that's what excites me most. I said it multiple times throughout this. As a Florida fan, I just want someone that I've seen win, preferably at multiple places, preferably at a high level. Um, just because with the Billy Napier thing, it's not even like they took a risk on a guy from the Sun Belt and they ignored a lot of red flags, just assuming he could upscale it, and he couldn't. Um, and that's a real problem. I need some kind of proof of concept that a guy can win. Honestly, in a lot of ways, I kind of want a coach like Dan Mullen when they hired him. And I think the history of Dan Mullen is that he was a great coach for Florida. He just kind of quit on the program. The pandemic kind of broke him a little bit. Um, and that's fine. Like that just happens. It is what it is. I kind of want a coach like that who I have seen win and I trust to just be super solid. And honestly, if Florida is just that level of program, I think in the 12th right quarterback once, you can win a national championship. So with Chris Kleiman, I think he's that. He's a guy who wins super high level. And assuming he can recruit down south, which is a maybe, it's not proven. I think he'd do a great job.
Yeah, and to touch on a little bit on those other two guys, Matt Campbell's definitely a guy I like. He's definitely shown to, he's a winner. I think what he's done at Iowa State is kind of insane because they're one of those programs that were kind of very dormant forever, and now they're just, they'll have their down year every once in a while, but they're just so consistent under him, which is just so rare for a program like Iowa State for football. Um, I think my biggest concern is, uh, would he ever want to leave? And I know you include that because I mean, look, he's had, he's peaked kind of higher than where he's at now in terms of Iowa State. Like they've had better seasons. He's had plenty of windows to leave for bigger jobs, and he just hasn't. And so I don't know if he's waiting for a really, really big fish. I don't know if he like was waiting for a better Midwest job. I don't know his situation, but you know, he's a guy who, there's two. I'll contrast him with someone else. I think of Mike Gundy. Like he's been at Oklahoma State forever, but he kind of makes it clear that he would leave if the right job came along, and teams just kind of don't want him. Like this is not me saying I want Mike Gundy, and this is not me saying Florida should go after him, but like if Florida offered him the job, if they wanted him, I think he'd take it. I think Mike Gundy would be Florida's head coach if Florida wanted him. Um, and I kind of in this, and so then contrasting with Campbell, he clearly is kind of shown where he's a guy who's sought after, but he's just not really been, rumored to leave anytime soon. So, and that's my one real concern with him. I have some, some other stuff like coaching wise, but for the most part, I think it's just would he ever want to leave? Um, and then Jeff Brom, he's a guy I like a lot. Like another situation where like he turned that Purdue team program around, where it's like, how did you do that? Like, what magic did you use to get this team to a consistent like 7-5, 8-4? They were in the Big Ten title game, right? Like a couple of years ago. Yeah. So, doing insane things that most coaches are not able to do at Purdue. I mean, we're seeing how as Ryan Walters is doing right now. It's not pretty. It's not great. And now he's at Louisville doing kind of the same thing. My one concern for him is, obviously you mentioned he's been able to get some skill guys. He's been able to utilize the NIL, but they're still kind of lagging behind the rest of the conference just overall in terms of recruiting. Maybe if he has more resources at a school like Florida, that changes, but I kind of want to see it more before we just assume that that would be the case. He does just win and kind of the sense of kind of like a Lance Leipold, but I would like to see him do it in a situation where he's bringing in a bunch of guys and like they have the talent to win rather than a situation where it's he's doing more with less because as impressive as it is to do more with less, it's kind of hard to do that consistently in a
Yeah.
conference like the SEC where like we're saying Tennessee is a playoff contender and I agree this is not me saying like oh well we think this but I don't know but like you say Tennessee is a playoff contender and they're still maybe like the fourth best team in the SEC. Like Texas is in the it just in terms of the AP top 25, Texas is one, Georgia's two. I think Bama's still in the top four. Like maybe they're on par with this Ole Miss team. Like doing more with less works when you have plenty of like Wake Forest and Virginia and Duke and UNC, like teams that are kind of like, we don't you're pretty good, but I don't know how good you are. And the SEC, like the sixth best team is looking like they're gonna make the playoffs. So, that would be my one worry in terms of him as a coach because he is older, so I think the
Yeah.
expectations would be a little higher for him.
And like Campbell, he's another guy that might never leave. He's from the city of Louisville. He went to the University of Louisville. He's coached at Louisville before. Now he's the head man in his hometown at his alma mater. He's a guy, he might actually just post up there until he retires. So
Yeah.
um I think there's one last like big fish in this, and then we get to some G5 coaches that are fun. But the last like big fish is Eli Drinkwitz at Missouri, who we both do not like at all.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, resume is the resume, and he has turned Missouri around in a super sustainable, super legit way through high level high school recruiting, high level portal recruiting. They have NFL players at pretty much every position group, and they might be a playoff team this year. So as much as I think we hate it, Eli Drinkwitz is definitely a name. Honestly, he and Missouri are at a point where it's like, why would he come to Florida? Which feels wild to say. So, what's your 2 cents on the whole Eli Drinkwitz of it all?
Yeah, it's crazy. From strictly a football coaching perspective, I think he'd be great at Florida. I mean, he's shown that he's, proven winner. He can recruit really well. I mean, they've gotten some big fishes there, which is kind of crazy. But to your other point, like you said, we do not like him. I mean, personality wise, he just really rubs me the wrong way. Just look at some of his press conferences and things he said. Like, it's not even like he's just kind of an ass. Like, if that was the case, then I wouldn't want Lane Kiffin at Florida because he's just kind of an ass. But like, he's just said some like weird things in press conferences. Like I'm not gonna dwell on it. You can look up some of the stuff he said, if you're listening to this and you're curious. And I'm not gonna just give light to that because it's weird. Just look up what he said about his family and their quarterback, Brady Cook, is all I'll say. Um, but yeah, like you said, I don't know why if you'd want to leave Mizzou. I mean, they're getting a stadium renovation, so that's going to get upgraded. It looks like their infrastructure's really set up in a good position right now.
Great
Um,
NIL up in
Great
Missouri.
NIL, and I mean they're contending really. They're recruiting really well right now. I mean, honestly, better than Florida. If I'm right. So I don't know if he'd want to leave. I think if he did leave, it'd be a good fit, but I don't know. I don't know if I want a guy like that just because personality wise, and I know like Florida's not in a situation where they need to hire good character, good personality guys, personality wise guy. But I don't know. Something about him. I just feel like there are better candidates on the list. If I'm gonna have a guy who rubs me the wrong way personality wise, I would rather have Lane Kiffin than Eli Drinkwitz, is what I'll say.
Yeah, and that's certainly where we're both at with this, I would say. All right, so you have my list. You see the G5 guys. I think there's 4 or 5 of them. What's the one that jumps out at you?
So I already mentioned Alex Golish. He's definitely of those of the G5 level, he's definitely my top guy. Other than him, I think a guy that really intrigues me is Jason Candle at Toledo. I think he's another guy who I think if Florida hired him, he would not be a well-received hire by the fan base because it does feel sort of Billy 2.0 solely from just a G5 coaching uh hire. But I mean the dude, he's a good coach. He wins. I mean, we just saw Mississippi State last week. They blew the doors off of them. Like they destroyed Mississippi State. He knows how to win. And I think more importantly, he knows how to recruit. I mean, they got Quinyon Mitchell, who just got drafted first round, and that was a guy that Saban was saying like he wanted him in the transfer portal, which I don't know if that was him admitting to tampering, but regardless, that just shows just how talented he is, and like that's a guy. And then I remember they just got a 4-star guy. I don't remember who it was or what position, but still very impressive for a school like that to get a 4-star guy, especially playing to get to play in the MAC. They have good NIL situation. I mean, they're landing former Florida guys. I believe Jadarius Perkins went there, if memory serves me right. Who Jadarius Perkins, maybe not the best SEC player, but in the MAC, that's a great pickup. And so I think, you know, to play in the MAC and to coach at a level like that where, they consistently win in a conference where it is hard to build a consistent winning program. And on top of that, um, recruit as well as he's done, I think he would be a very intriguing hire. Um, I think my main thing with him is, why does nobody want him? Like you said, he's had chances to leave, and I don't think he's leaving. He's staying there because he just loves Toledo so much that he's like he's going to be a Mac lifer. Just no
Yeah,
one's come out and been like to get him out of there.
it's crazy. There is absolutely no reason why Jason Candle is not the head coach at the University of Cincinnati right now. They should have hired him when Luke Fickell left Wisconsin, but yeah, like to your point, I know he was people mentioned him for some jobs. I know he was mentioned for the South Florida job. He was mentioned to potentially take over as Miami's offensive coordinator. I heard that rumor. I think it was this past cycle, and those interest me because those are clearly Florida. So there's something in the water with Jason Candle in the state of Florida, even though all his coaching career has been in the state of Ohio, which is interesting. And I think to your point, um, it's one thing to build a consistent winner at the G5 level. That's what Billy did as well. I think what's really exciting about Toledo and Jason Candle is that they've done a good job of kind of big game hunting in non-conference. You mentioned just smoking Mississippi State last week. I know they've beaten Illinois recently. They should have beaten Notre Dame a couple years ago, in the game where Jack Cohn broke his finger and popped it in on the sideline. Uh,
Oh yeah,
so like Toledo, like obviously they're the most consistent team in the MAC, but they're also big game hunting. And Jason Candle will be a good Power Five head coach. Maybe not to the Florida level, but dude's good. He's good at his job.
yeah. He's definitely in a situation where maybe he doesn't immediately want to go to a school like Florida because that has such high expectations. there is such, so much that, has to, taken out of you just in terms of what it takes to coach at a program like that. Where he's been at Toledo forever, so I think maybe he'd be up for it, but I don't know if he probably needs to step in the middle. He probably just to wait out Satterfield at Cincinnati because I mean, woof, that program is in a rough spot. I mean, so we'll see, if Satterfield goes, then maybe he then gets his spot there and he does really well there, and then maybe down the line hire him from Cincinnati. We'll see. We're kind of going, three steps ahead with that one. Really big picture, but he is a guy who intrigues me. And then the other name that of the G5 level that intrigues me is John Summerall at Tulane. He's a guy who kind of, from the mold of Mark Stoops, their former DC. He's just kind of he's another FFC. Like he just plays the game the right way and they win football games and they're tough, stout defensively. Um and he turned out a pretty big winning program at Troy and then now he's 1-2 to start Tulane, but I mean, you
They
know,
lost to K-State and Oklahoma.
yeah, and the K-State game was very close, and the Oklahoma game did not get like away from them till the very end. So, I'm not putting too much stock into those losses. I thought they played really well in the K-State game, um, and I think he's a pretty decent recruiter. Um, I think for him, he's a guy who he doesn't necessarily have the coaching experience, so I'm a little bullish in that aspect. And his recruiting's been pretty good, but it hasn't been to the level of like Golish, for example, at the G5 level. So those are really my two areas of concern. But I do like him.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's kind of exciting about him, if you're talking just on the field, so I think pretty much every guy we've mentioned is either a true CEO head coach or an offensively minded head coach. And John Summerall, alongside Dan Lanning, is the only one that like has a D coordinator background. And obviously Florida, we talk about Florida's offense, the offensive line, the quarterback. The big problem is the defense, which is kind of so bad that we don't even talk about it because like
Yeah.
what's there to say? They can't do anything right. John Summerall would probably fix that more so than any other head coach on the board, except maybe Dan Lanning. I also have Marcus Freeman on the board in the Dan Lanning tier. He would also fix the defense. So for John Summerall, that's fun and exciting for Florida. Maybe he's like a Muschamp light in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. Uh, I really think he's going to be in the SEC at some point. Maybe South Carolina opens, maybe Kentucky opens. He'll be in this league. Maybe it's not at Florida, but he'll be here somewhere.
Yeah. He's a guy who, like you mentioned, we don't really talk about the defense just because it is so bad, where it's like you look at the offense, it's like the clear issue feels like it's the offensive line. It's a rotating door when any quarterback drops back to pass. And on the defensive side, I mean, the defensive line doesn't get pressure. The defensive backs get burnt. They're bad at open field tackling. The linebackers are actually good. I like the linebackers, but it's like when everything around you is not very good in terms of the secondary and the defensive line, there's only so much they can do. Um, they can't completely change a game when it's like the meme of like the what is it, the Ferrari or the Lambo underneath the shed of like that like broken down house. It feels like that. So I think he's a guy who definitely could fix that because I mean that's been an issue for what second or third year of Mullen. So we're going on 5, 6 years of just a really just not good defense. It's not just not good. It ranks towards like the very bottom of the SEC and the nation. Um, so in that aspect, he really excites me. Um, like you said, maybe he's a guy who, again, you think three steps ahead, you think big picture. Say Florida gets a bridge coach now, get Gus Malzahn, get that stability. He's over, he gets the, say, Kentucky job if Mark Stoops steps down or whatever, and then you get him from Kentucky if he works out there. But we'll see. That's kind of three steps ahead, big picture. Of your tier two, you have two guys here that I would say I would mark as sort of aspirational, kind of as the in the Dan Lanning tier, and you just mentioned one of them, so I kind of want to talk about them real quick. And those are Marcus Freeman and Lincoln Riley of Notre Dame and USC. So of those two guys, Topher, you should talk about those two guys and why they're here.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm also a Notre Dame fan, so I'm pretty intimately familiar with both of these guys. For Riley, he was a name when he was a name during the Napier cycle, ended up at USC. Instant offense, can recruit skill positions at a high level, winner at the blue blood level. Honestly, I think USC is going to win 10 games and go to the playoff this year. They're really good. Uh, Quarterback, just add water. I think he would keep DJ because he had a good relationship with DJ as a recruit. Um, yeah, it's just kind of a question. I think he loves USC. I think that's his job and he's there for life. But if for whatever reason his personality is not what I expect and he wants to smoke in the Southeastern Conference, it would be a name. I don't expect it. And then Marcus Freeman, he has some high profile losses, but the dude's a killer. He will be one of the best head coaches in the country within 3 years. I love this man. He's a great leader. He's a great defensive coach. He's an excellent recruiter. Just look at the way Notre Dame plays defense when they're fired up, and that's kind of all you need to see. Uh, I don't think he's leaving either. The only way he leaves is if he gets fired or if Ohio State offers, and even then, I don't know if he takes that second one. Um, but if for whatever reason he liked the opportunity at Florida, I think it'd be a slam dunk because the dude does everything right except beat teams from the MAC, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the thing. I like them both a lot. I love Lincoln Riley. He's a guy who, on record, I really wanted Florida to get when they were during the coaching process after Mullen. Um, he was my top guy, and then they obviously hired Billy Napier over him because I don't know if he would have come to Florida then, but reports said he was interested. Um, I don't know how interested, but he was. So two guys I really like. Again, like you said, I just don't know if they'd ever leave their situations unless they were fired. And then if they're fired, do you really want to hire a guy like that? We'll see. But those are two intriguing names, and I don't have too much to add on to that just because again, they're more so big fish in the aspect of I don't think they'd ever leave their current situations as long as it's going well.
Yeah,
A
and
guy
I think
who,
there's one more name kind of in that tier, and that's James Franklin at Penn
yeah,
State. Was a huge name in that big cycle 2 years ago. He was linked with LSU. He was linked with USC. I think he was linked with Florida. Um, Great winner. He's kind of like supercharged Gus Malzahn in that way. It's just he does the thing. Obviously, he made Vanderbilt a winner, which is literally impossible.
yeah,
Uh, but he's another guy. He's getting paid a ton of money at Penn State, and he might just be riding that out until he retires. So it's another guy. It's just you kind of have to put him on the board. Uh, Probably wouldn't come. Would be very expensive, but would be very good.
I agree. And then so looking at some of the other G5 names you have here, you have Jamie Chadwell, who again, I think he'd be very fun. I don't know how well he'd do here. I don't want to dwell on him too much just because again, the third guy that we talked about last week or 2 weeks ago. So if you want to hear our thoughts on Chadwell, go listen to that first episode. But another G5 name here, and I think the last G5 name here in terms of just tier two is Barry Odom at UNLV. So Topher, you want to talk about him for a little bit?
Yeah, Barry Odom's an interesting one. He's gonna get some play in the SEC this cycle, I believe. I'm not an insider here, so this is just kind of reading some tea leaves. But he was an SEC head coach. He was the Gary Pinkel successor at Missouri. So he was the head coach there in the SEC. They were okay, but obviously not great. They ended up moving on to the Drinkwitz era, which has been much more successful. Um, he's been a defensive coordinator in the SEC at Missouri, at Arkansas. That's how he got this UNLV job, which kind of felt really weird and random at the time. But now UNLV is literally having the best moment in program history, and that's not hyperbolic. They have never been this good at football in their 40-year history of as a program. Um, so the SEC bona fides and like what is this new era of Barry Odom? It's kind of exciting. And obviously this really only works if he brings the offensive coordinator with him because Brennan
True.
Marion is a capital D dude. Honestly, he was on the initial version of this hot board, and then I was like, okay, UNLV offensive coordinator is not coming to Florida as head coach. But man, is
Yeah.
that dude awesome.
Yeah,
Um,
it's got to be a package deal. If you just get Barry Odom, I think he has it's just not going to work out. I mean, we saw how it was in Missouri. He's clearly sort of maybe rebranded himself or turned himself around as a head coach with how good UNLV is for what they are as a program in their history. But I think a lot of that also is attributed to their OC. Uh, So I think that if them as a package deal, I would be excited. If it's just Odom, I'm a little more bullish on that.
Yeah.
So kind of going into the rest of the tier two. Um, I think a guy we don't have to dwell too much on, but you have here and I am mentioned is Jonathan Smith. Great program builder. I think he's a good recruiter. I think just the main thing is he just took the Michigan State job, and I don't see him leaving anytime soon.
Yeah,
Anything you'd
he's a
like to add
he's a
on to
guy.
that?
He would stay somewhere, so we don't. I love him. That's why he's on the list, but he's not going anywhere this cycle.
Yeah. And then another real quick guy who just took a job, Kurt Signetti, another guy who FFC, he's won
Dude,
everywhere.
he's gonna be a hot name at the end of this cycle.
Yeah.
Indiana's like actually gonna win 9, 10 games. It's
Yeah.
wild. They are like good.
Which has me curious. Like, is he? I mean, obviously, if a super big school came in, I think he would take that job. But yeah, I wonder if he wants to sort of plant his roots for at least 2, 3 years at Indiana before moving on. We'll see. I am intrigued by that name. And then so the last two guys of tier two who I really want to stick some time on is Rhett Lashley at SMU and Brent Key at Georgia Tech. So Topher, make the case.
Yeah, so these are not the fanciest options, and one of them honestly might be bad, but I still threw him on there anyway because I like him. And that's Rhett Lashley. So again, I am like Gus Malzahn's strongest soldier for some reason. And Rhett Lashley is literally Gus Malzahn Jr. He played for him in high school, he played for him in college. He's coached for him at multiple stops over the last decade. Uh, I don't know. I kind of like what he's doing at SMU. I'm a little less bullish on him now because of what the heck's going on with that quarterback situation. But the fact is, he took over the good things Sonny Dykes was doing at SMU and kept it going and even elevated it. They won the AAC last year. They should have been the Fiesta Bowl team. They won 10-3. They're going to have a tough year in the ACC, but honestly, I don't know if that's his fault. There's only so much you can do when you're that light in the ass as a power conference team. Uh, I don't know. I like him. He coached at Miami, so he's been in high level Florida football before. He coached at Auburn. He's coached in the SEC. I like him a lot. But he definitely would be a way down the list option, and he may or may not work.
Yeah,
And then Brett. Oh yeah, go ahead on Lashley.
he's a guy who kind of like you said, it was funny. Like we talked about this off camera. We liked him, but whatever is going on with their quarterback situation has really kind of changed a little bit of how I think about him because I'm like, I watched Napier right now dealing with this whole Mertz Lagway situation, which to the outside eye feels pretty obvious what should be done or what needs to be done. And Billy just seems to be messing it up with the weird rotations, like all the bad sequencing, just all of it. And now we're kind of seeing with SMU where like they won last week, but like you kind of have a dude and what is Keith? What's his name? Keith Stone? Am I correct, or am I thinking
Preston
of
Stone. Preston Stone was
Preston?
their starter the last like 2 years.
Keith Stone is a former Florida basketball player, so that tells you where my head's at. Preston Stone seems like a dude, and like he's trying to do like a weird QB rotation with him and Kevin Jennings, and now he just makes Kevin Jennings the starter. So I really don't know what's going on with that. And again, we'll see how they do in the ACC. Um, I do like him as a coach, but again, like you said, he is down the line of if the first like 15 or so guys say no to you, then go to Rhett Lashley. And then I'll let you go to talk about Brett Key.
Yeah, so Brent Key was a name I kind of came to late because I was committed to make this a 25-man list because I thought that was funny.
Yes.
And Brent Key was kind of the late addition, but the more I think about it, the more I actually really like it. Uh, Especially, if you miss out on Lane, if you miss out on Lincoln Riley, like whatever, like those big hitters, as like the mid-tier guy, he's doing a job. And specifically, he's doing a job at things that Florida needs, which is stability, which is recruiting. He's doing a freaking number. Honestly, he's doing better than Jeff Collins, who is a big time recruiter in his own
Yeah.
right at Georgia Tech. And he is A1 offensive line coach. He turned Georgia Tech into literally the best rushing offense in the ACC, kind of out of air. Um, and he's a clear base level of functional because he fixed all of Georgia Tech's weird disaster on like special teams and all that nonsense. Uh, and I think he would help fix a lot of Florida's offensive line issues. I think he would fix some of their recruiting in that specific position group. The question is he a What's his ceiling as a head coach? Does he want to leave? He is a Georgia Tech guy. He's a Georgia Tech alum. Um, and what does his ability to like build out a staff and all that stuff look like? But honestly, he's pretty sick. And he coached in Florida before. He was at UCF under George O'Leary for a long time. So I don't know. I like him.
Yeah, no, I like him a lot. And I think the biggest thing is just he knows how to coach an offensive line. I think that aspect alone really excites me. He's definitely turned Georgia Tech from just a laughing stock of a program in the ACC into very competent and maybe even dark horse contender for the ACC. I don't think they will. But they're definitely an exciting program, much more exciting than they were a few years ago under Jeff Collins. Um, and so I think he's a guy who, he kind of funny enough, like is a bridge coach for Georgia Tech of a certain, aspect, and you kind of be the same thing at Florida almost. But I think he could definitely turn around a lot of just the silliness that that program has and a lot of the incompetency they have at certain levels, just on like special teams and offensive line and areas like that, where you have to be good at, just to be 7-5, 8-4, you gotta just do the like simple things correct. And Florida does not do that right now. So he's a guy who I definitely like a lot. And then we'll kind of just we'll see if Florida were to hire him, it's just kind of a wait and see. But I do like that name a lot. So I think that's touching on all the guys in your tier two. Um, so that takes us into the final tier three. So, this is sort of what I would kind of classify as the break class in case of emergency. Every head coach, Florida really is the place that no one wants to coach at, like some people try to make it out to be, and no one wants to come here and it's over. So you got to go someone who's, a coordinator, maybe don't really have the head coaching experience, but you have to take a flyer. And they, maybe they have a low floor, but they have a high ceiling. That's kind of how I would describe it. So you have some guys here. A guy I want to start out with, that's actually not on this list, and I just want to pose it to you. Who I think would fit in this tier is USC's defensive coordinator, Danton Lin, who was really good as the DC at UCLA, and now I mean, smallish sample size. We're 25% of the way through the season, but through 3 games, uh, he has fixed USC's defense, which felt impossible, which is like insane. Like they were
Yeah.
maybe the only defense worse than Florida.
Yeah. He's a great coach. Honestly, I hadn't considered him mostly for regional recruitingness.
Yeah.
Like he's a West Coast guy, but he's really, really good at his job. Honestly, he's a guy I think shouldn't be a college head coach. I think he should be in the National Football League. Like just straight up. He's one of those coordinators that is so good schematically, so good coaching up guys. He should be at a higher level than this, just straight up. But he's a very, very good coach.
Yeah. And again, I don't know if he'd work out. I don't know if he'd even want to come to, the South, play or coach in Florida, but he is a name. So kind of now going into the guys you have in your tier three. Uh, First name, Glenn Schumann, the Georgia defensive coordinator. So Topher,
Yeah,
floor
he's
is
the
yours.
next one in the kind of Saban, Kirby Smart, Dan Lanning line. He went to Alabama, was a student assistant for Nick Saban, was a GA for Nick Saban, has just kind of slowly worked up the ranks, pretty much from the second he was 18 years old
Yeah.
to now through the Saban and Smart system. He's a name a lot of fans have already mentioned because of that. And honestly, those reasons give him a super high ceiling. He's like 34, great recruiter, tons of upside there. I just don't like it because of the experience. I want Florida to hire a head coach that has head coached before. But the ceiling there is no ceiling for a guy like Glenn Schumann. He could be Dan Lanning, but he also could be like Jeremy Pruitt. So there's kind of a wide range of outcomes for a first time head coach, but he's the one with the clear highest ceiling of these coordinators, in my opinion.
Yeah, he's a guy who I definitely like a lot. I mean, we're seeing with that Georgia defense, it's ridiculous. And he is from a very, successful tree of football coaches. So he is a name that intrigues me. But again, I'd like to see experience, at least at a coordinator level. Like you said, like he's only 34. Um, hasn't even been Georgia's DC that long at all. So, maybe just a couple more years, we'll see. So maybe it's like you get a bridge coach and then you get him. We'll see. So moving on to the next name, Kane Womack, Alabama DC, former South Alabama head coach.
Yeah, so I like him as a football coach. He's a good defense coordinator, was good at Indiana, was pretty decent at South Al. He had some buzz for some bigger jobs when he was at South Al. He took the Bama DC job, I would assume, for a combination of higher pay and to eventually get a job like this because he'll get those SEC bona fides under Kalen DeBoer. Uh, this is actually he's my 25th guy on the list. I don't love it. I like it though. I think it'd be a little Billy-ish with his specific Sun Belt resume. Um, but man, I don't know. He coaches good defense and he has been a head coach before. He's another one. It might be a down the line thing. I could certainly see him at a mid-tier SEC team or an ACC program, and then he does a great job, and it's like, dang, Florida should have got that guy. But he doesn't excite me the most, but he has an interesting resume that I think was worthy of kind of throwing as a flyer at the end of the list.
Yeah, he's a guy who, I don't have much to say. He has experience at the Sun Belt level coaching. He's Alabama's DC right now to sort of get up there, move up the chain, but uh and we'll see. He's in a new regime right now with Kalen DeBoer as they try to continue that Saban era legacy. And so he's kind of a guy who I'm very wait and see on. I wouldn't be as upset if he went somewhere else and turned it around and Florida missed out on him, to be honest. So then that leaves us the final guy on your list, uh, Travaris Robinson, Georgia DC. Topher, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so to my knowledge, unless I'm missing like an early stop somewhere in one of these guys' careers, I believe he is the only person on this list to work at the University of Florida before.
There we go.
He was Will Muschamp's defensive backs coach, I believe, in the early 2010s, and I don't think I need to tell you that that was a really good era for Florida defensive back play.
Oh yeah.
Um, and he's one of the very, very, very best assistant coaches in the Southeastern Conference and has been for 15 years. He recruits at an extremely high level. He develops at an extremely high level. Um, he's been at Alabama the last couple of years developing the DBs and Terry and Arnold, Kool-Aid McKinstry, all these guys are now in the NFL, high level picks. Um, the only thing about him is that he has no head coaching experience. But unlike a guy like Schumann, who's only been around for so long, like Robinson's been coaching in the SEC for a decade. He's seen it. He's worked for Saban. He's worked for Smart. He worked for Muschamp. Um, I don't know. He might honestly be my favorite of the coordinator guys. Like I know I said Schumann has the highest ceiling. I don't know. I like Robinson as a guy who maybe deserves a chance to do a little more than just be a position coach. And he's getting that at Georgia right now. I don't know. I think he's got a very interesting resume uh, to me that screams SEC head coach. Um, and I'm kind of curious what he could do with a job like Florida.
Yeah, he's definitely a guy who I like a lot. I think kind of to what you just said, with Glenn Schumann, I think Glenn Schumann could maybe be a spot where he is where Travaris Robinson is now. I don't know if he'll be a coordinator long enough to until he reaches that level of experience because, maybe he does this for 2 3 years, he might be a head coach already. But with Travaris Robinson, he's definitely a guy who's kind of been everywhere in the SEC. He's shown that he can coach the areas where he's told to coach at a very high level, and particularly in the defensive backs. And he's a guy who I like a lot as a potential candidate if they were to go the DC or coordinator route. And I think another thing that's interesting about him is, he would be if Florida were to hire him, he'd be the first full-time black head coach in Florida football history. I believe they had who was it? Who was the coach who coached the FSU game in after Mullen in
Greg
2021?
Knox.
Yeah, he was, I believe, the
I think
first.
it's Randy Shannon and Greg Knox, right?
Yeah,
Interim head coach.
those two. They were interim. But they've never had a full-time black head coach. So,
That'd be
would be
cool.
very cool on that end, just from a history aspect. And I mean, it's kind of crazy to think that, in Florida's 100 plus years of history, they've never had a black head coach, which is just kind of insane. So he's a name that I definitely like a lot of the tier three. I think he's my favorite guy of this ilk of coordinators. Um, so I think that about wraps it up for, the hot board, the 25 guys. We've talked about pretty much all of them. So Topher, I will pose this to you. I think we are in agreement that of tier one, Lane Kiffin is our guy. I mean, obviously
Yeah.
Dan Lanning is better, but he's
Honestly,
very much
honestly,
not realistic.
to be honest, head to head, I low key actually kind of prefer Lane just because he's just got kind of a swagger about him that
Yeah.
I kind of want Florida after the moribund state of things under Billy Napier. I kind of want to just have a little bit of brashness, a little bit of swag, and I kind of like that Lane has that.
But yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think Lane would be very fun, and I think the kind of brand of football he brings to would bring to Florida would just be just so refreshing. And so then going into tier two, say Lane says no, say Dan Lanning, they try to get him, says no. You got to go to this tier two. I think we're split on who we'd want to Topher. Who would be your tier two pick?
Yeah, so I'm gonna ignore the guys that I think would just say no in tier two. I'm gonna say for me, I'm gonna say Gus Malzahn. I just like Gus Malzahn. I think he would stabilize a lot of things with some ceiling as well. Um, Plus he's my second favorite coach in the entire country, so I would be happy. So we're gonna go Gus.
There you go. I'm gonna cheat a little bit and say two guys, just because I think the guy who I want to say, I'll because I have a heart and I have a brain pick. My heart pick is Alex Golish. I love what he's doing recruiting at the G5 level. That I think would translate to the P4 to the SEC. He knows the region. He comes from a very fun scheme or style of offense, the veer and shoot, and from Heupel. And I think he could just be a very fun head coach. Again, it's more so hard just because A, I don't think it would be well received by the fan base to get another G4, G5 guy, and B, he hasn't coached at the P5 level or P4 level now. So it'd be kind of wait and see. But he is the hard pick for me. My brain pick is probably Chris Kleiman from Kansas State, FFC, just knows how to win. I think what he's done at Kansas State is pretty fantastic. So those are the two guys I'm kind of going with. And so then finally, say every guy in tier three says no. The G4 guys say I'd rather coach at Toledo. The P4 guys say you're the worst P4 program in the nation. Why would I go there? So you got to go to the coordinator route. Take your pick of tier three, and I think we might be in agreement here, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'm Team Travaris Robinson.
Yeah, same.
He's done so much good work as a coordinator and a position coach in the SEC. Give the man the keys. Let him just cook. And honestly, if it just brings back the Muschamp era, honestly, I'm fine with that. I think that'd be a fun
Yeah.
change of pace.
I mean, you know how I feel about Muschamp. You know how I feel. I think if you get back to Muschamp era and then you get a competent offensive coordinator, like honestly, I'm almost curious if you get a guy like I know Jason Candle isn't necessarily I don't think he's necessarily an offensive guy, is he?
He's is.
Yeah. So like for example, like Sean Lewis was kind of in that same spot where it's like, how does this guy not have like a head coaching job yet in the P4 level or just higher up from just the MAC? And he had to go take a sort of job downgrade to be OC at Colorado just to then get the San Diego State job. So I look at a guy like Jason Candle. Obviously, maybe once Cincinnati moves on from Satterfield, because I could see that happening. Maybe then they finally take a look at him and are for real with that. But if he just feels stuck, then maybe he's a guy where it's like, hey, I'm never going to go to the MAC to a better head coaching job. Maybe let me be OC at Florida for a year and be really good. And then all of a sudden, now everybody's like, wait, this Jason Candle guy's a good head coach, or he could be a good head coach. Um, which I think kind of sucks for the MAC as a situation for head coaches to move up, but kind of is
It'd be good for
beneficial to a
Florida.
program like Florida. Exactly. So yeah, so just
Yeah.
quick run through. That was the 25 guys. So tier one, we are in agreement. Lane Kiffin is our sort of dream candidate. Tier two, you said Gus Malzahn. I said Golish or Chris Kleiman of Kansas State, Alex Golish of USF. And then tier three, we are once again aligned on Travaris Robinson, the co-defensive coordinator at the University of Georgia. So that is our massive mega hot board. episode. Real quick, Topher, do you just want to touch on the other teams this week? Notre Dame, massive, massive win
Yeah,
against
yeah.
Purdue.
We can't be sad and already wish casting Florida head coaches without talking about the fact that our other teams are cooking right
Oh
now.
yeah,
Notre Dame, look, people overreacted to a loss at Northern Illinois. It's a 12-team playoff era, baby. That doesn't matter. That
exactly.
don't
They're
matter.
back. They're so
They,
back.
they wiped Purdue off the face of the earth. It was Purdue's largest margin of defeat ever.
Woof. Not what you
It was
want.
42 nothing at halftime. Uh, that's it. Notre Dame's cooking. They're
There
back.
you
Don't
go.
worry about it. Don't worry
I
about that
think
NIU game. Don't even sweat it. Playoff
exactly.
team.
It's over. It's over with. And then Cal 3-0. 3-0 heading to play 0-3 FSU, just like everyone drew it up. Just like everybody chalked it up. Undefeated Golden Bears playing the winless Seminoles. Uh
Gosh, I need them to win. 0-4 Florida State would make everything feel so much better.
I knew them to win, but something about just like it just is setting up to be FSU's first win. There's too much hype around Cal. There's too much hype around the fan base. They're bound for disappointment. I hope it doesn't happen, but it just feels that way. But
But we need the Cal win so that way. So Cal beats Florida State, hilarious. And then Cal
uh,
Miami would be game day.
it would be college game. That would be electric. That'd be so sick. If Cal beats FSU though, then they officially have to rename that stadium Woke Campbell. It has to happen. So we'll see how that goes this Saturday. We'll see how Florida does. If Florida loses to Mississippi State on the road, I mean that's the one SEC team that's probably worse than them. Um, I mean Billy's just he might have to get tarmacked.
I mean, it might
So
get tarmacked if they win. So
that's true. That's very true. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Uh, we kind of we're curious what would happen after that A&M loss, just with some of the rumors swirling around. They lose to Mississippi State on the road. There'll probably be some more rumors, and maybe we'll be back to talk about that. And we will see. So this has been another episode of the two Florida fans in front of a Denny's or in front of in a basement in a rural central Florida basement, talking about Florida. So thank you for listening.